Welcome back. Now, the police and the Departments of Justice and Social Development are not providing enough support to victims of gender-based violence. That's according to a report released by the Public Protector. Now, the Public Protector found that magistrates' courts across the country were poorly equipped to support victims of gender-based violence. The investigation emanated from the administrative challenges faced by the public, particularly women and children in the South African criminal justice system. Advocate Kholeka Gcaleka says that her office has uncovered concerning trends, calling for urgent intervention by the Department of Justice. The Public Protector, Advocate Kholeka Gcaleka, now joins us virtually to elaborate on the report. Advocate, thanks for your time. Welcome to Morning Live.
Good morning, Sakina. Good morning to the viewers, and thank you for having me on the show.
Advocate, perhaps just to give context in terms of why the investigation came about. So in your report, you state that, I think it was on the 20th of June, you had the Deputy Minister 18th of June, 2020, the Deputy Minister for Justice and Constitutional Development, Mr. John Jeffrey, requested your office to investigate allegations that stemmed from the murder of Altisha Korke by a former partner in 2020. And in fact, she had gone to a police station in Bellville on the 12th. On the 8th, rather, of June, and she was subsequently murdered by the person against whom she was trying to get a protection order on the 12th, which was just 4 days later. So please elaborate for us on this case and also the start of this investigation and, the scope that you had for it.
Indeed, Sakina, correct. The Deputy Minister, Mr. John Jeffrey, approached our offices asking us to investigate whether the officials of the Department of Justice had erred in any manner in attending to the matter of Ms. Korke when she went to make an application for a protection order at the Bellville Magistrates Court. We then embarked on this investigation and actually concluded it within the same year. And we had found that, in fact, the officials had done the best that they could to assist Ms. Korke. However, in the course of our investigations, we had picked up severe systemic challenges and infrastructural challenges which actually impede on the rights of victims of domestic violence to really access justice as infringed in our constitution. Upon closing that part of the investigation, we then assumed an own initiative investigation, which we are mandated to do in line with the Public Protector Act. In there, we broadened our scope to basically looking into really the plight of victims of gender-based violence when they access justice. Now, it then prompted us not just to look into the Department of Justice, but into the Department of Social Development, as well as the South African Police Services, which are an integral part of the criminal justice system in supporting the victims of gender-based violence. In respect of the Department of Justice, we firstly looked at personnel, sufficient personnel, are they sufficiently trained, knowledgeable, the psychosocial support that's been provided to them, the environment within which they function, but also issues of the form itself, because when we investigated the failure to attend to Ms. Korke, we actually interviewed a lady who had accompanied her to the court, who said that she ended up not completing the form because, first and foremost, she was not in a proper state mentally and psychologically to attend to that form, which she found to be very tedious. And there's not much psychosocial support that was given to her at the court when she attended. So those are the kind of issues that we looked into. Are the prescripts being followed to the latter? Is the Domestic Violence Act being implemented to the latter, which we found was not. Section 41 of the Constitution makes provision for cooperation amongst departments with interrelated functions, and we found that even that was not being sufficiently implemented.
So just to elaborate on that further, Advocate Kholeka, because I think it's so important in what you mentioned in having interviewed the friend of the now late Ms. Korkie, that there was too much to fill in. She was not in the right frame of mind in order to go through all of that. And this speaks to, of course, the heart of what you were looking into, as to whether not just police stations or, the magistrates' courts, but I suppose that entire chain is properly equipped to support GBV victims.
Indeed. We actually found that the entire chain was not properly equipped in terms of its own systems. If you look at our report, we found that there's no proper integrated case management system, not just in the Department of Justice, but across the board. There's no data sharing and access of one department into the data of the other department to be able to make proper analysis and develop not just their systems, but also their processes in line with providing an efficient and effective service to gender-based violence victims.
And I must say, I'm just reminded of having gone to a police station not so long ago to get an affidavit done for a lost document. And again, even today, when you walk into police stations, and I'm not sure whether this is the case universally, but at least the police station that I had walked into, there's clear demarcation of people who are here for a specific situation, let's say gender-based violence in this instance, need to sit here. Well, it's all good and well that you've demarcated a space for them, but it's in the eye of the public. We all walk in there and we all look, oh, so you here regarding a gender-based violence issue or this, that, or the other. And of course, that is not conducive to assisting the victims so that they could feel at ease to actually get the support they need, Advocate Kholeka.
It is indeed so. Our inspections into the police stations actually found the same, Sakina, that the police were not adhering to their own instructions of having victim-friendly rooms. Victims were being interviewed and attended to in the full view of the public, which really is an unsafe exposure to the victims, because the very same perpetrators are around the same area. Their right to dignity is being infringed in a manner that they need to relate their incident in the full view of everybody, but also it perpetuates the victimization, basically, so those are some of the provisions that we've made into our report, and we fully understand the budgetary constraints that the police have and the rest of the state departments for that matter, but it is then critical that they utilize the resources within their reach amongst one another fully. So in instances where a police station as yet doesn't have a victim-friendly room, they must at least utilize office space around just to ensure that they preserve the dignity of the victim, or immediately approach social development to ensure that they at least get some space where it can be conducive, and in areas where there's Tutuzela care centers and other care centers which are available to transport the victim to that area to perform further procedures.
And I think it's important, Advocate Kholeka, not to make excuses for what is happening in the criminal justice system, letting these gender-based victims down at the moment. Because as you say, you could set aside an office where you can deal with these victims, where they are not in the full glare of the public. Whether you have a budget for that or not, it's an office. And then you go to the court system. And here again, the victims are complaining that they are coming face to face with their perpetrators. And that, of course, should not happen. Again, it's not a question of a budget. It's a question of just thinking strategically in order to make sure that the victims are accommodated.
Indeed, Sakina, those are part of our discussions and even how we've interacted with this particular matter, that even in the court system, where there is insufficient space to actually have a victim-friendly room or a room which is preserved for witnesses. And by the way, a lot of money was spent previously to renovate courts and ensure that they are compliant with ensuring that they provide safe spaces. But in areas, for instance, in rural areas, we found that those spaces are not in existence. But officials really need to think out of the box and be strategic, as you say, but understand the context within which they function. Now, what we also found is that there's insufficient training to ensure that officials understand the context, because it is not just dealing with just any case, a number or a file or a docket, but these are human beings who've got certain circumstances, and in this instance, quite traumatizing circumstances, and they need not to be exposed to further trauma. So we've also made provision in line with our remedial actions that court officials and other officials who interact with victims of gender-based violence are accordingly trained as well. But my view is also that it does require not just the skill, but a certain level of passion to deal with these kind of matters, because it is not just your random criminal matters that you're supposed to deal with. So a person really needs to give more than just what is required to attend to matters such as these.
So the problem is then, Ms. Gcaleka, this is by no means a new issue. These problems have been there. It's been persistent, and the fact that the police, for example, in their various stations know that they need to deal with criminal gender-based violence victims in a different way than just the general public, means that they are aware of the problem. They know something needs to be done, but obviously not dealing with it adequately. The same with the other departments that need to assist here. So, as per your findings and your report, ultimately, what then needs to be done to first strengthen and also make sure that the criminal justice system is adequately supported to deal with this scourge and not just pay lip service to it as we have been for years?
Sakina, if I had not spoken to some of the police officers, I would also just take it for granted that, in fact, this is, 101 when you deal with victims of gender-based violence, but you'd be amazed that some of them actually do not know. Hence we've put training at the center of the remedial actions that we are taking. So our remedial actions really address the infrastructural deficiencies which we have found. Our remedial action addressed the systemic deficiencies which we have found. They address the process deficiencies which we have found, basically dealing with the entire full chain. You firstly have also, most importantly, deal with the human resource, the numbers. We must admit as well that police officers deal with huge influxes of matters that go to police stations, not just matters of gender-based violence, but all other forms of crime. Crime is really on the increase in our country, but that is not an excuse. Due care and diligence should be taken, particularly dealing with the victims of gender-based violence, who are in the main women and children, who from day to day face these forms of violence and abuse against them. Therefore, our systems should not then also be of abuse and to them, because we do need them to come forward and be able to report. So, and also to ensure that there's an integrated case management system that speaks to each department being able to attend to these matters, even after hours. For instance, applications for or protection orders, that there's provision for those to be made online. Currently, they are unable to do so because the infrastructure of the ICT is actually not in operation. So this actually assists, because the protection is that the victim is able to do that application within their own comfort. Serving of these protection orders, we know that it's not just the police who need to assist, there's the sheriff and so forth, but the criminal justice system in the state itself has got a constitutional mandate to protect its citizens, and therefore it shouldn't be that victims are let alone to serve these protection orders unto their perpetrators, because it becomes a further exposure unto them. There's the issues of the shelters. Some live with the perpetrators in the same house, and that's in most of the cases, and that there should be sufficient shelters, properly equipped, so that they can become immediate safe havens for the victims. But what is critical is that there must be continuous improvements of our systems, of the infrastructure. We have also spoken to the Department of Public Works and Infrastructure, which is really responsible for the state infrastructure, which in this instance we also found that there has been some delays on their parts. So it is critical that they understand what is at stake, and they quickly implement. And they have done so, and they will also be providing us with an implementation report and a plan and timeframes within which they would be of assistance to the Department of Justice and the police in the main.
We are just about out of time, Advocate Kholeka, but I just want to look at some of your recommendations and, how you concluded all of this, because I know some of the departments were given a time frame within which to at least improve some of these things. So if you could just summarize for us that very briefly.
First and foremost is that they need to ensure that the integrated case management system is up and running. The filing of these cases, their archives, tools and other forms of equipment are being provided for. There's a speedy remedy to the infrastructure, but also that these departments ensure that they get together and ensure that they've got an integrated system of working with one another. They cooperate and they interrelate with one another to ensure that there is sufficient and effective processing of victims of gender-based violence. So they need to provide plans to us within 180 days to 210 days. But I must say that the Department of Justice in the main has already begun with the work, issues of support staff that's been provided, and also looking at their archiving, which they've started to do, the revision of the forms for the protection orders to ensure that they are in a manner that they are easily understandable, and that sufficient support is being provided to the victims when they approach the courts.
Advocate Gcaleka, thank you so much for your time this morning. Advocate Kholeka Gcaleka speaking to us about a report on findings on difficulties experienced by victims of gender-based violence when reporting cases at police stations and also going through the court system.